We're now just 3 short days away from the celebration of Christmas, and the gospel moves us along toward that moment of the birth of Christ. Yesterday, the gospel that we read was the Annunciation. Well, today we have the culmination of the Visitation, that is, the Magnificat of Our Lady. And we see how closely it resembles the hymn of praise and thanksgiving sung by Hannah. The first reading explains how Hannah went to the temple, brought Samuel, her son, to give praise and thanksgiving to God. Hannah, who was barren for many years, and prayed that the Lord would give her a child, and that if the Lord granted her this grace, that she would consecrate this child and dedicate it to the Lord for his entire life. And so we go on into the responsorial psalm, which is the words of Hannah, the words of her praise and thanksgiving to God, which closely resemble the words of Our Lady in the Magnificat. And we can certainly say that the words of Hannah probably had an influence on Our Lady. Our Lady had knowledge of the Scriptures, better knowledge than anyone else. And nonetheless, we should affirm that Our Lady's hymn of thanksgiving in the Magnificat is unique to her. She, being the immaculate spouse of the Holy Spirit, of course, was inspired by her spouse to pronounce these words. And Our Lady explains in the Magnificat how God had blessed her with this grace because of her humility. And this is the first and necessary disposition of the soul in order to receive any grace from God. As James writes in his letter, God resisteth the proud and giveth grace to the humble. And so Our Lady was more humble than any other creature, and as a result received greater grace than any other creature. This is also the necessary disposition for each and every one of us in order to receive God's grace this Christmas season. And so we ought to know very well what is the virtue of humility. The definition of the virtue of humility is this: the virtue by which one acknowledges that God is the author of all that is good. That God is the author of all that is good. That we shouldn't attribute any of our gifts, our natural gifts, or our supernatural gifts of grace to ourselves, but recognize that God is the source of all that is good in us and in others. And this is exactly what we find in Our Lady's hymn, in the Magnificat, is that she is acknowledging God as the author of the good things, the great things worked in her. As Our Lady says, because he that is mighty has done great things to me. We also notice in Our Lady's humility that it's not a false humility. She isn't denying the fact that God has done great things in her. St. Alphonsus Liguori points out that Our Lady had good knowledge of her being filled with grace. And of course she knew that God had given her this great gift of the vocation to be the Mother of God. But at the same time, she knew more than anyone else that all of this was due to God's goodness and generosity with respect to her. And so as a result, she receives greater grace than others and magnifies the Lord. As she says, my soul magnifies the Lord. And so let us ask Our Lady, as we are making our final preparations for Christmas, to receive Christ and to receive a greater outpouring of His grace, to fill our hearts with this virtue of humility, to recognize and attribute all good things in us and all the good that we are capable of doing, principally to God and His action. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.